Okay, welcome back to the Daily Move. We had a request for some wrist stuff, especially since a lot of the mobility work that we've been doing requires a lot of us leaning on our wrists. And some of our wrists have never done that kind of work before, and so we're just gonna do some mobility work for that. Some of us too, especially myself, we've been spending a lot more time on the computer, so it's always a good idea to warm that up. Because we can't just work on the wrist, I'm also going to throw in some finger stuff in that, some shoulder stuff, maybe a little bit of spine, just to kind of prep your work for any kind of hand stuff. Enjoy. So before we get started, you guys are going to need a few things. You're going to need something to squish, so that could be a hand towel. This is a glove. You're also going to want a ball. It doesn't matter the thickness, it's more on your preference. We're going to be using it to roll, and we're also going to be using it to do some motions with the wrist. You're also going to want an elastic band. The thicker it is, the more challenging. The looser, the easier it's going to be. So yeah, go grab those objects and we're going to get started. So the first thing that we're going to do here is we've got the ball, and I just want you to make wrist circles with it. So we're going to do 3 in one way, 3 in the other way. We're also going to really entice Tally because they love playing with their balls. Afterwards, you're going to scrunch and then open up your fingers. Other side. So next, what we're gonna do, you've got your hands together like this. See if you can just take the pinkies away from each other, but you can see my palms are still firmly pressing against each other. So you can do this in a prayer position, or you can have it down on the ground. You just can't see it with my hands on the ground. So what I'm doing here is I'm keeping my hand down on the floor, and I'm just lifting one finger up, and then the next finger up. Next finger up. Ring finger is always going to be a little bit harder than all the other fingers. Then the pinky, and then the thumb. So again, we've talked about passive and active range here. And so I'm a believer that if there's a difference between your passive and active, that there's room to improve your range of motion. So this is my active, meaning that's as far as I can bring my finger by myself. Like I made that happen. Passively, I can bring it back further. So passively, I'm going to take it out into that position, and then I'm going to push my finger down. So active, passive, push. Active, passive, push. And that's going to help just open up that gap. So now we're going to do it with our middle finger here. So sorry guys, I don't mean to be offending anybody, but active, passive, push. Active, passive, push. One more. Now onto the ring finger. So there's the active range there. There's my passive, and I'm pushing it down. Active, passive, push. Come over, Tally. Pinky, active, passive, push. Active, passive, push. Active, passive, push. Same thing with the thumb. I'm gonna lift it up. Now, you want it in line with the thumb joint. I'm not trying to pull it up this way, although you could work that range as well. But I'm actually trying to open up. So, trying to go this way instead of that way. So, active, passive, push. Active, passive, push. Now, my active and my passive are actually matching on that one. So that one's pretty good. So the next one that you're gonna wanna do is you're wanting to crunch or curl those fingertips. So if you do have something, you can actually pick it up to curl over. So I'm gonna take my finger here and I'm curling, and then basically I should be able to hold that with one finger. Middle finger. Now, if you're having a hard time because everything else is contracting or curling down, you can curl and then try to press down and hold the other fingers that you don't want moving. So now we've got the middle finger, sorry, the ring finger, now the middle finger. and don't forget the thumb. So we're gonna switch sides here, so same thing. We're gonna lift up the finger and then just kind of see how much range we have in each. And now we're gonna go active, passive, push. Active, passive, push. Active, passive, push. Next finger, so active, passive, push. So be mindful, I don't think most of you have actually done finger work before. Maybe you have, I mean, climbers, gymnastics, and then into the thumb. But if you haven't done it, you do want to go quite gentle because you don't want to create stress in the fingers because they're not used to that. So we're trying to curl and squeeze, curl. You can use the other hands to help. Now, that's kind of interesting with my middle finger looking at the camera. It's actually kind of twisted a little bit. So I'm going to try to put it straight again. And your thumb is going to be pretty strong in that position. Okay, so now you just want to relax those. So next you're going to go onto your knees here. Hopefully you can see my hands. So my hands are placed like this. All my body weight is actually in my legs, and so I'm lifting up and then I'm coming back down. If that's too easy for you, you can start putting more body weight pressure into it, making that more difficult. So we're putting pressure onto the fingers there and then coming back down. The thumb is lifting. And of course, people can walk it forward, put a little bit more pressure. People that are really good can go up onto their toes, do the same thing. I wouldn't recommend just jumping straight into the toes. You definitely want to build up that strength in the fingertips first. So next we're going to stretch out those fingers. So we're going to take one finger at a time. We're going to pull it back, feeling a good little stretch there. So now you're going to grab something to squeeze. So rolled up towel works perfect, but we're going to squeeze and hold like you're wringing out a towel, trying to get every little drop of water out there and relax. Let's go 3 times again, really squeezing hard, and again. Okay, switching sides, we're going to do the same thing. So I'm squeezing and relaxing. Squeezing and relaxing. Squeezing and relaxing. So next we're going to take the rubber band here. We're going to place it around all 5 digits there. And what I'm doing is I'm expanding my hand and holding for 3 and then relaxing. So now we're working the opposite. Squeezing, pressing out, switching sides, doing the same thing. You may notice that one side is more difficult than the other to perform this on. My left hand is certainly noticeably weaker compared to my right. So next we want to go up onto our fingers. So we're tenting the fingers here and we're putting weight onto it. So again, you can put all the weight into your feet and barely put any pressure on it. You can start leaning forward and putting more pressure onto it. If that's too easy, you can go up and put your feet up, lifting the leg, etc., etc. And we're just trying to load those fingers. Okay, so next we're gonna go back into the wrist. So this is a good idea for that ball again. So you're gonna grab the ball into your hand and just be mindful that the motion's coming from the wrist and not from the shoulder. So what we're gonna do here is you're gonna slowly bring the wrist down. You should feel a little bit of a stretch here. If you want a little bit more of a stretch, you can actually pull the wrist down. And then now you're gonna slowly bring it up. Same thing, you can bring the ball back. Down and up. So this is option number one, doing it with a ball. You don't need to do it with a ball. We can get rid of the ball there. And you can do this wrist forward. Now you can either do it with a fist or you can have the fingers extend. What I really like doing is starting with a fist, coming down, and then once it's down like this, opening up my fingers, closing my fingers, coming back up, opening my fingers and coming back down. So give it a shot. Those are just a bunch of different variations. You can try different ones on different days for that. I find with that little like spider crawl, I just feel it a little bit more. So next we're gonna stretch that out. So you're gonna take your hand here and you're going to pull back. So this is option number one. Option number two, if you want something a little bit more aggressive, my hand is here and I'm leaning back. You can actually do both hands at the same time when you're doing it that way. So again, guys, listen to your body. Every person's body is gonna be a little bit different here. So we're not trying to create pain or jam those joints into weird positions that it's not ready for. So you can always start nice and gentle right here, just pulling it back. So the next one to work then is we went backwards. So now you're gonna pull down, and the same thing, if you create that wrist and pull it down, you're gonna feel a stretch right here. It's gonna be a little bit easier with your fingers open. And then if you want a harder version, same thing, fingers open first, you're placing it down here and you're leaning back. If you wanna make it harder, make that fist happen. Hold the fist and then try to lean back. And this one's significantly harder. You can try undoing the fist and making the fist as you stay into this position here. Same thing, when you're in this position, you can actually work both at the same time instead of individually. And again, just respecting it. We don't want any wrist injuries. So another thing we can do here is we can actually start creating some traction into the wrist. So one way we can create traction is by grabbing one wrist. I'm pulling the wrist away. So this is the wrist we're working. And then what I can do is I can actually rotate my wrist here, keeping my hand still and rotating the wrist, creating a little bit of space. Or what you can do is place it down on the ground. This arm is pushing this arm down, but then I'm taking my left shoulder and I'm lifting it upwards, creating a little bit of traction. So that's gonna create a little bit of space into that wrist joint. Okay, make sure to switch sides. So again, you can take your hand over top and I'm pulling my hand away, and you should be able to actually see some space created. You can kind of see right there. A little bit of space is created. Again, you want to be quite gentle with this. And then with that space, you can actually start rotating almost at the elbow socket just to create a little bit more space there. and then placing it onto the ground, my other hand on top. This hand here is pressing into the ground as I lift up with the shoulder. Again, creating just a little bit of traction there. So next what you're gonna do is you're gonna take one hand like this. My bottom of my hand is on the floor like this. I'm bending my elbow, and as I do that, I'm gonna start going to my fingertips. I'm gonna move back just a tad so you can see what I'm doing here. So I'm gonna lean back at the elbow. You're gonna feel a stretch here into the fingers, and then I'm gonna come back up. Let's go 4 on one side, 4 on the other. Okay, we're gonna switch sides, doing the same thing. So I would say if this is your first time ever working your hands, this is probably a good time to stop for one day. It's about 10 to 15 minutes work on your hands and fingers. It's probably a good time to shut her down. I just want to give some other people some other ways of working the wrist so you can stop and come back and then work them in different ways. So the next thing that I like to do for my wrist is I basically change my hand into all 4 directions here, both with my palm down, but also with my wrist up. And then I rock back and forth between 4 to 6 times. So first my fingers are facing forward and I'm leaning forward and then coming back. Again, depending on how much weight I'm putting into my hands is going to make that a lot more difficult. And then I switch. When I go sideways, and I'm rocking from side to side. Now what I prefer to do is when I start going left, I'm going to take my hand and kind of pull it inwards, and that's what's going to start creating it, making sure I'm actively going into that position there. Again, I don't want to force anything that my wrists aren't ready for. Okay, switching again. So you can go side to side like this. You can also do circles as well. And that finger drill that we were working before, we could actually do it here too. So we could hold this position and then try to lift up our fingers in those positions, and it becomes much more challenging for that. So we're gonna do the same thing all 4 directions, but now my palms are facing up. So being very gentle here. So in this position here, more my body weight is into my legs than my wrists right now. And then as I build up strength, then I can start walking outwards. And yes, people can do this up on their toes in that plank position. So again, you can rock side to side here. I was kind of just bending my elbow and straightening them because I was feeling enough of a stretch there. Now I'm kind of twisting my elbows out and leaning back. I always like this stretch. This one always feels good, especially after climbing. Okay, the last position here. So to shake that out. So that could be one whole set of drills there where you just go in all 8 directions there, just putting a little bit of pressure, and that will actually start building some strength into the wrists. The next one that I'm gonna do here is I'm putting weight into my wrists and I'm moving my elbow pits. So here's my elbow pit here, and you can see it turn and turn again. So I'm turning in, I'm turning out. Now I'm going to stay locked out, and I've actually got my shoulder blades that I'm going to sink down and come back up. So it's not a cat-cow, but rather what I'm doing is I'm sinking down into my shoulder blades, pushing my shoulder blades back up. So next what we're gonna do is we're gonna pinch our forearm here, and we're gonna create a circle with our wrist. So I'm gonna take my thumb and I'm moving my wrist this way towards the thumb. Then I'm opening up my palm. Then I'm taking my pinky side, I'm coming down, and then I'm kind of fanning myself. So I'm making a circle at the wrist. It's not just my fingers that are moving there, but rather it's actually at the wrist joint creating that rotation. And you can go in both directions there. So we've already done this flexion extension thing. We had it with the ball. So the abduction and adduction of the wrist there is what's new. And it's the motion that allows us to go this way and that way. And then with this circle, we're just combining that flexion, extension, adduction, abduction. And then while we're on the theme of it, I like to do supination and pronation. So what that is if I have a bowl of soup here, I'm going to start spinning it towards the thumb, and then I'm going to start dumping it out. So I'm picking up the bowl of soup, dumping it back out. So I've seen this drill done before with a hammer where you're holding it, which is actually a really good way to train that, especially since the weight will be heavier on the side of the head of the hammer. Okay, we're going to switch sides here. So again, flexion, extension, adduction, abduction, and then we're going to combine them. So again, we'll have one side that this is a lot more fluid on. It's funny, my right side actually has more compensations. I think it's just found ways to cheat over the years, and it just wants to gravitate to the way that it is used to moving. But yeah, it gets really stuck right there. But that's why it's always good to kind of check in here, because sometimes with bigger motions, something like even a handstand, that will get masked. You won't understand where that limiting factor is. And then when you kind of do this body scan, you're like, oh, there's a limitation right there. And if my body can't properly extend my wrist this way, it's going to change everything else in my handstand. Now, of course, handstands aren't everyone's goal, but it doesn't matter what you're doing. If there's a limitation somewhere, it's a weak point that needs to be addressed. So then you want to do supination and pronation of that wrist. Again, with that soup, like you've got a bowl of soup, you're turning it towards the thumb, and then you're dumping it onto the floor. Okay, so next we're going to work into the shoulder here. So you're going to create a circle here, making sure that the body isn't compensating for it. So we're going to go 3 times. The third time you're going to stay up here, and then you're going to start turning this arm in and out. Now you can get the whole body involved, just twisting it around there. Okay, reverse those circles now. Same thing, opposite side. On the third one, stay up there. Start internally and externally rotating the bicep as if you're changing a light bulb. And now get the whole spine involved. Okay, whatever direction you had with your hand, we're going to go the opposite way into the circle. So now we're going to have our hands here and we're going to be changing those light bulbs, but in a bunch of different directions and variations. So we're being really random here. Okay, you can relax those wrists again, as well as going into a crab position here. And similar to what we were doing when we were kneeling, you can actually start wiggling onto all those different aspects of the wrists. You can change the wrist position. You can even flip it. If you flip it, I would only recommend flipping one at a time, again, until you've built up the strength. I also like putting my hands into different positions here, creating a very tall spine and pulling back. I find like I get a really good stretch into my pec muscles there and into the bicep. And you can even sit your butt down and then twist your arms back so the back of my hands are on the floor. I'm leaning it back, and then if you do a really proud chest, lifting the chest up towards the ceiling also does a really good job. And easing out of that. It's also a good idea just to warm up the spine with all this work. And what's nice about it is because our hands are on the ground, we're still working our spine in this motion. So we're just going to start with the classic cat-cow. Now I want you to work on lateral flexion. So now I'm bringing my hip bone down towards my pelvis. So I'm bringing my rib cage down, and then try the other side. And now try any kind of combination of that. So you can go flexion, side bend, extension, side bend. So almost like creating a circle with that. Now try reversing it. Try doing cat-cow into a child's pose position. That's going to get more into the thoracic. Same thing, you can even side bend here. Combine those motions. You can try it up into more of a seated position. So getting the side bend, getting into flexion, extension, side bend, creating a combination. And I also like starting on my feet and just putting my hand into different positions, having to weight bear into them. So you can do it forward, you can do it sideways. You can have your palm facing the ceiling. So I am dictating how much weight I'm putting in there by how much pressure I'm putting into my feet or taking away in order to put pressure into it. You can even go up and really press into the shoulder blades, getting a little bit more weight into it. You can even try to create a little bit of a hop, making sure that all the load is into the wrist now. So you can practice loading it in a bunch of different ways. So now the ball is going to come back out again. And now we're gonna roll. There's two different ways you can roll. You can actually put your arm down like this and actually use your knee to actually press into the forearm. This actually gives it a pretty good massage. Not everyone likes being this close, but that is an option. The other option is having the ball, and you can actually roll out your forearm as well. This isn't the best surface for it, but hopefully you can see it on the ground. That looks better. So I'm just rolling out the muscles here. So make sure to get the front and the back. It's a good idea to get the palm of the hand as well. So the danger of rolling out a forearm is the stress that we put into our shoulder to try to put the weight down into the ball. So just be mindful of that. Make sure your shoulder's not cranky with this. And you can also put the hand on top as well. There seems to be a tight spot right here on myself. And again, don't forget the palm. And the way that I want to finish this workout, this wrist workout, is shaking out the hands, making a fist, shaking out the hands, doing the stop sign. Shaking out the hands, fist, and then the stop sign. Just a couple more of these. Hands together, you can create some circles here. We'll leave you with a wave. This one I actually like too because it really gets into the shoulders as well as the wrists. So there you have it, the daily move with the wrists. I wouldn't recommend following that entire video. 30 minutes on your hands is going to be too much for it, especially if you're your first time. Rather, I would just pick certain segments to try out. I would just do little dosages over the week instead of just once a week with 30 minutes. Well, give that a shot, see if that helps out with the wrists. And then with the other mobility stuff that we already do where we're walking on our hands, should also strengthen that as well. Stay healthy, guys. Bye.